Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, proudly brought to you by Ravens Recruitment, Australia's pharmacy recruitment agency, spotlights the myriad of career paths available to pharmacists. Your host, Christy Lee Patterson, and her esteemed guests will be sharing invaluable career advice that you can implement at any stage of your career journey.
Welcome to Your Pharmacy Career Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Lee Patterson, and today we have a very special guest, Emily Griffin. She is the 2023 Early Career Pharmacist of the Year for Victoria and is also known as the ENCAPSULED pharmacist. Emily is known for her influential role in rural pharmacy and being an advocate for pharmacists, and she has a deep commitment to fostering positive workplace cultures. In this episode, we will explore her journey, achievements, and the impactful work she does. Welcome, Emily.
Thanks so much, Christy. What a lovely introduction.
That's okay. Thanks so much for joining us today. I thought before we kick into the questions, could you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background as to why you got into pharmacy in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I guess I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do for a long time, and it wasn't until halfway through year 12 when I went down the road to a community pharmacy in Bendigo. And I guess it was really the community spirit and the feeling as though they were really making a difference there that made me want to get into pharmacy. Fun fact, at the time, even up until the end of year 12, my two career pathways were pharmacy or fashion design.
Oh, fashion design. That's interesting.
Yeah, two very different career paths, but I ended up going with pharmacy. La Trobe were very generous with a few scholarships, so ended up going there.
Oh, amazing. Well, I guess the other thing is you can still have a flavour of fashion in your everyday life anyway. So, fashionable pharmacist.
Got a bit of a creative brain as well. So, I can kind of have a bit of an outlet of that on my Instagram. And yeah.
No, that's awesome. So, you mentioned about that moment where you walked into that pharmacy in Bendigo. But were there any other key moments or influences that really got you to draw yourself away from fashion into pharmacy?
Well, funnily enough, I had received a scholarship to go to a fashion school as well. And I had gone there for a short period of time and I decided that wasn't for me. But that placement down the road really was instrumental in making me make that decision. It was just the way that they sort of had a real community there at that pharmacy. They knew everyone that came in. And it really felt like they were making a difference in people's lives. So, yeah.
I had a very similar experience in the very first pharmacy I worked at, and it was a rural pharmacy, very much community-based. And I think when you have that experience first or very early in your career, it really does shape the trajectory of your career. It certainly did for me. And so you've strongly been an advocate for rural pharmacy. Can you discuss some of the initiatives or programs that you've either supported or enhanced pharmacy practice in rural communities?
Yeah, so I guess my underlying passion comes from growing up in regional Victoria. And I didn't actually ever think I would move to Melbourne, but here I am. But I studied there. I didn't want to move at the time elsewhere. So that was also, I guess, important in the career choice I was making because La Trobe Bendigo offered SC as well. And after my degree, I actually moved rurally to Echuca and I stayed there for a few years as well. And having then moved to Melbourne, and I did undertake metro placements as well during my time in my undergrad. But there is so much disparity between the healthcare systems rurally compared to our metropolitan services. And it just shouldn't be the case because, as I've said before, the care of people in rural and regional Australia is just as important as the healthcare of those in metropolitan areas. And statistics show that people living in rural areas are more prone to health conditions like coronary artery disease, and cardiovascular events. They're more likely to die earlier. Not only die earlier, but die from preventable illnesses as well. So there's a lot more we can be doing to support our rural and regional counterparts, and it really should be a higher priority than what it is. So I thought in my role as the Rural Pharmacy Liaison Officer that this was a way that I could give back to rural and regional Victoria and Australia, even though I'm not currently living there. And yeah, I'm running quite a lot of projects at the moment in that role. So just a couple of weeks ago, I organised a CPD event, and that was hosted in regional Victoria. And even though I'm employed by Monash University, I wanted to host that event to La Trobe, Bendigo, because that's where I studied, and also to try and get some students attend as well, and sort of just to make it a collaborative event between the two universities. And we had a guest speaker, Adam Lavori, who's an incredible pharmacist, and he's really done a lot of work in the cardiovascular sort of space, and he currently is the lead pharmacist at Ballarat. So it was great to have that sort of intersect all these rural and regional things come together. We ended up having over 100 registrations, and that was from Australia-wide. Yeah, and even some international people as well joined. So yeah, it was fantastic, and I was really happy and with how that all turned out, and hopefully can host some more in the future.
Yeah, that's a massive turnout. Yeah, over 100 registrants. I know how hard it can be to organise events like that in regional locations. And when I was working in central west of New South Wales, when there were events like that in the area where I lived, it's so important because it can also feel a little bit isolating as a pharmacist, especially because you're most likely working longer hours and more days than maybe people in metro, because there's not as many pharmacists, so you do need to work a little bit harder, a bit longer.
Primary health sort of service in lockdown. Yeah.
Well, congrats. That's a really, really good achievement. And the fact that it's a collaboration with the two universities as well, I think that's really important, having that collaboration and rather than doing things in silos.
Thanks, Stacey.
That's okay.
We're working on a lot of placements at the moment. In my role, I've come to find that metropolitan universities are not really sending students on rural placements anymore. Sort of a bit of a result of a post-COVID kind of situation, I think. But if students aren't being exposed to rural and regional placements, then they won't even consider that as a career option. So I'm really working hard with the universities and with community and hospital pharmacies, rurally and regionally, to offer some really great placement experiences for our students.
Yeah, I haven't actually even thought about that. Yeah, being post-COVID, they probably, didn't really want to send people here, there, everywhere in Australia. But as you said, it really is important if you don't get that experience, even if it's the pharmacist doesn't eventually move out there or work there, but it gives that sense of what it is really like. And you can have your own assumptions of what a regional, rural, or remote location can be and what the issues are, but until you see it, you really actually have no idea.
Yeah, that's right. It's all about exposure and experience, and even if they don't end up wanting to work in those areas, at least they may understand a little bit better about what life is like on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I want to chat to you now about your award that you won, the Early Career Pharmacist of the Year for Victoria. What does this recognition mean to you, and what were some of the achievements that actually contributed to you getting this recognition?
Yeah, it was overwhelming actually just being nominated for that award, and then to receive it, especially to be handed it by Dr. Amy Page, who's an incredible pharmacist and so inspiring. It was, it's so overwhelming. And the awards night was really amazing. There was so many incredible pharmacists there. Yeah, the whole thing was just really overwhelming. I was nominated for my contributions to the profession through professional services, innovation, community programs, health promotion, professional development, and patient and pharmacist advocacy. So I guess it was sort of a culmination of all the things I'd done in my career up until that point. And still obviously being early career, even now, I guess I'm just lucky to have had so much experience so early on. And I guess it is partly because I always say yes to things. But yeah, I do really want to make a difference, and I do have a real passion for pharmacy. I guess the main things that were discussed at that award was my contributions to co-building the Australian first voluntary dying statewide pharmacy service, which was an incredible experience and achievement to become a senior pharmacist so early on as well. And through my business, ENCAPSULED, just offering home medicines reviews, but I also do other consulting as well. And now I've just recently moved into pharmacist coaching, for clinical and soft skills, diversifying. Yeah. And then my Instagram page, the ENCAPSULED Pharmacist. Yeah, I guess I talk about rural pharmacy quite a bit there and about my sort of diverse career. And yeah.
That's a lot. When you really start ticking off the list of all the things that you've done, it really is quite a lot. And for people that maybe don't know what an early career pharmacist is, it's if you've been in practice for 10 years or less. And if you're a very fresh early career pharmacist, so first year out, it might yet be a bit even maybe intimidating when you see people such as yourself winning these awards and think, oh, wow, they've achieved so much. But what do you think that in 10 years, that's actually quite a long time. So you can actually achieve a fair amount in that time. You mentioned as part of the recognition that you received for the award was your work on the voluntary assisted dying statewide pharmacy service. That's a bit of a mouthful. Now, yeah, tell me about your work in that. It's something that, you know, when you were co-developing it, was still quite a controversial thing, and for some people it's still quite controversial or new, and a lot of people don't understand what it is or why there's a need. So maybe in your own words, could you tell us about the work that you did and that impact that it has since then?
Yeah, great question. So it was back in 2019 when the hospital was sort of looking for a team to build this service for the state. So the legislation in Victoria was passed in 2017, and then there was an implementation phase for creating a medication protocol, etc. But the statewide pharmacy service was created in March or April 2019. So for me, I just sort of thought this service would eventually exist in Australia because it existed elsewhere across the globe and had for quite a long time in some countries since the early 2000s. It was actually available in the Northern Territory in 1996, I think it was, just for 1 year.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, not many people know. 2019 was the year I'd actually moved from rural Victoria, Echuca, to Melbourne. And I had started a new role in the hospital in Melbourne, and I was the undergraduate coordinator for the pharmacy department. So I looked after all the pharmacy student placements that came to the hospital. And I was also working in Gen Med at the time. And during that time, in the first couple of months, there was this pharmacy sort of staff forum about voluntary assisted dying, and that this hospital was going through the sort of state service for that. And during that staff forum, I noticed that most of the questions were related to the storage of the medication, all the potential problems with the legislation, people's personal opinions. And for me, I sort of felt like I was on a bit of a different page during this forum, because to me, it was more about the service that we were going to actually deliver, to make sure that it was compassionate, patient-centered, and that it was done right. So for me, it wasn't just a question of that legislation or about people's opinions. To me, it was that we provided that service to a really high standard. So I guess that's why I went for the role, because I thought, well, if I've got all these ideas about how this service should run, then I should put my hand up and go for this role. And at the time, I was 24 or 25. So going for a senior role at that age was pretty unheard of. But I'm so glad that I did go for it, and that, I moved into that service. So there was so much to be done when the service is non-existent and is the first of its kind in Australia. You've got to go back from the ground up. So guidelines, protocols. I created patient information booklets, creating the kit itself and how that would look. Yeah, so much. Safety processes for the pharmacists. I created sort of debriefing tools and reflection strategies for the team as well. And our team grew so large so quickly because of then that demand for the service. So I moved into service in March, I think it was, in 2019. And then we were expected to be seeing people by mid-June. So there wasn't very long to create all of this. And being part-time in the role, I had to move into the role full-time pretty quickly to actually get the service ready to be able to deliver to people. And so the service itself was based on home visits. So we would always go and see the patients in their home or in a hospital or aged care facility, wherever that would be, across the entire state of Victoria. And I would usually spend anywhere between an hour and a half to 3 hours with someone, educating them about the medication, and providing them that medication if that's what they wanted, provided that they would be safe to have that medication.
I think you mentioned that the reason you're so passionate about it is that being the patient advocate and ensuring it's patient-centered. And I think with any new service that's implemented, having people part of the design process, being an advocate for the patient is so important. And I think sometimes we forget that, and not intentionally, but it's more, when you said there was a lot of questions around the storage process and the legislation around it and understanding that. But at the end of the day, it's about the patient and understanding what their needs are and making sure that it fits their needs, essentially. So I'm just thinking now about any sort of service that is implemented in pharmacies, whether it's hospital or community or other practices, ensuring that there's people there that can advocate for the patient is really important. And looking at it from that lens of the patient, that experience that they have can also affect the outcome as well. And so if they have a less than ideal experience, that can also affect their health outcomes as well. So yeah, just got me thinking. Got a little bit off track there, but I was just reflecting. I thought, that's so important. We really need to make sure that it's about the patients. And
I guess that was sort of going back to the very first question. I've always really loved helping people. So that was probably an underlying drive for going into something in the health professional world as well. But yeah, to me, if someone's in healthcare and their main reason for being in healthcare isn't to care for people, then that's a serious red flag.
Yes, that's exactly right. I totally agree. I think that majority of people that I speak to, they got into healthcare for that reason, what they want to help or make a difference, and which is good. I also wanted to touch on your pharmacist coaching. You mentioned that you're very passionate about workplace culture, and as part of some of the things that you've been doing, you're now moving into pharmacist coaching. And so, what does that actually mean for people that are listening? What is the pharmacist coach and what do you do?
Yeah, awesome. So I try and work with people to, identify their goals and what they would want to achieve from the coaching, and only sort of onboard people that, it feels like we would work well together and that I would genuinely be able to help them with what they want to achieve. So it mostly focuses on either building and developing clinical skills. I've got quite a varied experience in hospital, pharmacy, and have worked in a number of specialties. So I can help people with, clinical sort of skills, soft skills, the other component, which is, I find, really helpful for a lot of international pharmacists that are moving across to Australia, and for younger pharmacists or early career pharmacists who are working on their conversation and communication skills with patients or the medical team and other health professionals. I think the way that going back to that patient care, the way that we interact with people, it's so important to their outcomes and to whether or not, they take on board the information that we provide them. So ensuring that we communicate the best way we can with them is really important. Also working with people on diversifying their career. I think I get a lot of feedback, especially on my Instagram, about how my career is so varied and the current roles that I have. I actually can't think about maybe 6 different employments at the moment on top of my business. So people are always very intrigued by that, and people want to know how to start diversifying. And then the other main area of coaching is in-home medicines reviews. So there's been a big overhaul this year with the APC, the standards for accreditation or credentialing. So new courses have come out. I actually helped create one of the courses available, which was really nice to be asked to be involved in that as an expert in the field as well. But yeah, really working with people to help them be the best credentialed pharmacists that they can be. And it's so confusing when you're first starting out, or if you don't do many home medicines reviews, how to kind of approach them and how to, again, get the best outcomes for the patient.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm not an accredited pharmacist, so I don't really know much about how you would even go and seek that type of work, as opposed to just sitting and waiting for a referral to turn up.
If you just sit there, they take that.
That's what I was thinking. Like, they probably wouldn't turn up. So yeah, that's brilliant. And I think too, with the diversifying your skill set, I'm seeing a definite shift from, like, I've been in pharmacy for almost 15 years and a pharmacist for 10 years. And just the way that people approach their careers just in the time that we've been around has changed so much. And rather than that, got one job, it's full time and that's what you do, and that's kind of where you stay. Having multiple roles or doing things part-time, doing things on the side. And I think that the term for it is portfolio career.
I was one of that.
Yeah, I've seen it on LinkedIn a few times, and a few people talk about it in other industries about having a portfolio career, and instead of staying in a role that maybe you're not learning or you're not earning or you're not getting anything out of it, rather than just staying to stick it out, moving into things where you are going to be learning new things and trying new things. And I definitely seen a shift for that, and I'm doing it myself now as well. I've got a whole list of random things that I'm doing, but I love it. And I just definitely see that shift, which is really exciting, because it means that, especially pharmacists, we're expanding our skill set so much, and by being able to do different things. And it also highlights how important pharmacists are as well, that we're being recognised in other areas, such as that what you mentioned now with aged care and GP, and who knows what other areas we'll be working in the future, which is really exciting.
Exciting. I think that wherever medications are, pharmacists should be. So
that just seems so simple, and it seems crazy to me that is not the case. I'm sure if you asked a regular Australian off the street, that would be the answer, right? So that just makes perfect sense. We'll get there eventually. Now, lastly, I'd like to speak a little bit more about your business venture, the ENCAPSULED Pharmacist. And first of all, what inspired you to start this consultancy service? As someone that's also started their own business, it can be really quite daunting in doing something new and going out on your own, and so many unknowns. And I find that there's always a passion behind it. So for me, educating and collaboration are things that are really important to me. And so I'm sure, after our conversation, I can see there's definitely some areas of passion that I think inspired you to start this business, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah, so my business is called ENCAPSULED, and then my Instagram page is the ENCAPSULED Pharmacist, which is a little sort of spin-off my business name, I guess. So the business kind of started because I had become accredited, but now it's called credentialed pharmacist for home medicines reviews. And then it just kind of developed from that. So obviously being able to deliver care to patients in a different way was why I undertook my HR credentialing. And I love caring for people, particularly in that home setting. It's such a privilege to be able to go into someone's home and provide care and education. And I think for me, that's sort of been one of the most rewarding parts of my career. So going into people's homes for home medicines reviews, also going into people's homes for voluntary assisted dying, and also when I was the senior pharmacy clinician for the health independence program, that also involved home visits. And all those three sort of areas of my career have been so rewarding. Yeah, I love that component of it. And then, so I guess my business just kind of grew from there. I started my Instagram page, which is what I've had been wanting to do for such a long time. And it's really just that ripping off the Band-Aid moment and just doing it. But there is so much kind of imposter syndrome feeling around any of that kind of thing. And if there's people listening that are wondering if they should start a business or start up a social media or just just do it, because and I try and tell myself every day about something new I'm working on or whatever it might be that you wish you'd done it sooner. So just go out there and start it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But yeah, so I do sort of collaborating with health businesses and other health services for either educating their staff or educating their clients about products or services related to medications. I offer coaching services, and I do medication consulting with doctors and other health professionals. So I offer tele services for pretty much all my services as well. So yeah.
So you don't really do much at all then, do you?
Narrow it down at some stage, but at the moment, still being early career, I'm like, do all the things.
Yes, do all the things. I love it. And I think that's a great way to start as well, is to just start. That's what we said is, there's no right time. There'll always be reasons why you shouldn't do something. And as part of that, the journey to growth is, making mistakes and changing it and adapting. And I'm sure that since the day that you started your business ENCAPSULED to today, it's probably changed a lot since then, and the direction is continuing to change. I know I see that in my own business, what I went to start with, there wasn't really a need. No one really wanted to pay for those type of things. So I adapted and I found a niche, which is really cool. But if I didn't try, I never would have known. And I think as pharmacists, we are so lucky that people used to say to me, well, if you're going to start something new, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Like, well, the worst thing that could happen is I work in a pharmacy. I get a job as a pharmacist. That's actually not so bad. But what's...
Get-go.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted to be. So it's actually not that bad. And so then reframing it as, well, what's the best thing that could happen? And by starting, and if you don't start, you never know. And I didn't really want to grow up and get old and have regrets. And I don't know if you've experienced this, because you've spent a lot of time with people that are at the end of their lives. And I've heard people say that you don't regret the things that you do, you regret the things that you didn't do. And so I think, just give it a go. What's the best thing that could happen?
That's so true. Yeah, and certainly, working with people who are terminal and also experiencing quite a lot of death and cancer in my personal life, it certainly made me want to deliver a better service to people. And it certainly makes you think, or second guess some of the things that you think are a big deal at the time, and they're really not when you compare it to, situations like that. So
it definitely puts things into perspective. I've definitely seen that too. Yeah, sometimes the things that, I thought was the end of the world. I don't know if there's people that are listening that, have kids, and when you were at school, it seemed like it was the end of the world, and like, if this person doesn't hang out with you, it's going to be the worst thing ever. And I see this with my stepdaughter, and I try to explain to her, like, it's not the end of the world. Like, there's so much more coming. Like, just, it really doesn't matter. And so, it definitely puts things into perspective. We've been chatting for a little while now, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your advice for aspiring pharmacy professionals, whether they're early career pharmacists, students that are not yet registered, or even those more experienced pharmacists that have been in the industry for a while that are wanting to do maybe something different. What advice would you give to people?
That is a very broad question.
I know, you could actually do a whole podcast just on that question. Feel free to answer all of it, or even just some of it.
So maybe just some general advice, maybe to lean into some of the topics we've discussed today.
Yeah, brilliant.
So recently I asked a group of my students, some fourth years, why they wanted to become a pharmacist. And I think this is a good question for people to ask themselves as well. Why are you a pharmacist? The responses from the group of students were a bit of a mix. So some examples were, it's a stable career. I didn't get into medicine. My parents said it was a good career option. And yeah, that kind of blew me away because, as I said earlier, if you're not going into healthcare to help people or because you care for people or something along that sort of line of thought, regardless of what the practice setting is. So if that's hospital, community, research, academia, at the end of our line is always patients, patient care. That's what healthcare is. We can always learn and we can always grow. So 2 is probably, how can I be a better pharmacist? 3 would be for people to do some work on reflecting on personal values and they would want to deliver care to people and find a workplace that aligns with these values, presuming that those values are fostering a positive culture because a workplace culture has a big impact on your everyday well-being, whether that's a positive or a negative workplace culture. And my other piece of advice would be to say yes to everything. There has to be a point where you do have to say no. Like saying yes has taken me on an incredible journey in my career so far. And I've achieved more in my 7 years of being a pharmacist than I thought that I ever would or could. So yeah, say yes.
I think that's great advice. I had similar advice given to me. And then also I had the privilege of being the occasional speaker at Charles State University some years ago and giving the address to newly graduated pharmacists. And I said a quote, I believe it's from Richard Branson. I hope I haven't got it wrong. And he says to always, even if you don't know how to do something, say yes and figure out how to do it later. And so that's something that I've always tried to instill in myself, saying yes, but also touching on something that you mentioned earlier in our chat was putting your hand up for things. So if you don't put your hand up and also seek those opportunities, then you might not be able to say yes to them because people don't know that you're wanting to give it a go. And that can also be the scariest thing, is putting your hand up for things because you feel like you don't have the experience or the skills, or you'll tell yourself so many reasons why. And rejection is really hard, I know. And I think, but even if you don't get the role that you're wanting, ask for feedback. And it's something that I didn't do earlier on in my career, but now if there's something that whether it's a role that I'm seeking or even a client that I'm trying to get on board, and getting that feedback from them as to why. And so then that way you can develop more skills or maybe adjust your pitch or to make the next one better. So I think that's also some really, really good advice. Yeah. It's been amazing speaking to you, Emily, and I'm so glad that I reached out to you to do the podcast because I was following you on Instagram and I'd seen you on LinkedIn and doing all this cool, amazing stuff. And I thought I definitely need to have you on the podcast. So thank you again.
So nice. Thank you so much for reaching out to me, Christy.
That's okay. And for those that are listening, make sure that you follow Emily on both LinkedIn and also Instagram and all the other things. And if you're interested in maybe getting some extra support through her coaching, we'll have the links to her website in the show notes as well. So again, thank you so much for being with us today, Emily.
Thanks, Christy.
Be very happy to just say the word.
You've been listening to Your Pharmacy Career podcast, brought to you by Ravens Recruitment. Don't miss our next episode, where we continue to explore the multifaceted world of pharmacy careers. Make sure to subscribe and share.